A report by the civil rights group Action Aid Nigeria detailing how Nigerians are coping with the impact of inflation and the economic realities facing the nation. Arise News correspondent Georgina Ndukwezanika reports that the group is advocating for drastic measures and transformative solutions to stem the increasing level of poverty occasioned by the removal of full subsidy.
Across the country, signs of increasing poverty are becoming more visible. A study conducted by the World Bank says the poverty rate in Nigeria reached 38.9% in 2023, with an estimated 87 million Nigerians living below the poverty line. Sadly, this figure will likely increase in coming years with the recent hike in the pump price of petrol to over 900 naira per litre nationwide, with vulnerable Nigerians in rural communities most affected. Action Aid Nigeria went to 18 states in the 6 geopolitical zones of the country to carry out a survey on how government policies have impacted the people. The humanitarian organization is now making public the result of this survey, put together in 2 reports: the impact of austerity measures on poverty and gender inequality in Nigeria, and the impact of Nigeria's removal of fuel subsidies and flotation of the naira on women and girls.
One is looking at the DEX analysis, looking at all the macroeconomic measures we have put in place as a country and how it is affecting the education, the health sector. Then the second aspect is now going to the community. What has been the coping mechanism?
The outcome of the survey shows that the hike in the pump price of petrol has led to an increase in food costs. Families in rural areas can no longer afford 3 square meals a day, with some resorting to eating cassava leaves.
When we got to the field, we saw that the suffering had another dimension entirely. A lot of people told us about eating once a day. For children, they ate half the normal meal that they used to eat. Many of the children, particularly the girls, dropped out of school. As for the men, what we got in some quarters was that some men had actually left home. They left home to look for greener pastures. Some didn't come back.
Farmers in the communities surveyed say they can no longer afford to buy fertilizers needed to plant their crops.
A whole lot have resort to trekking. Yeah, a whole lot have to abandon their businesses because of this the increasing cost. And it's very painful to hear from many of the parents telling you that our daughters are resorting to prostitution.
The government is now being called upon to ensure economic empowerment for women, prioritize social investment, particularly in education and healthcare, as well as tackle the country's huge debt profile, which has grown from 31 trillion naira in 2020 to 91.4 trillion naira this year.
Fiscal responsibility was top on that agenda. So the 6 trillion naira, for instance, we're saving from this recent hike in price of fuel. Where is it being deployed to? Where will it be going to? Are citizens involved on decision-making on how that is being used?
You remove subsidy, you increase the fuel price. They are now talking about increasing VAT. All this cannot happen at a period when the income is stagnant. The income is not increasing.
Without swift action by the government, the situation will deteriorate further, leaving Nigerians wondering how long they will have to bear this burden. Georgina Ndukwezanika, Arise News.
Well, we're joined now by Arise analyst Dr. Constance Ikokwu. Glad to have you join us here this morning, Constance. Alarming what we're hearing. I mean, this is like deja vu, Constance. Action Aid advocating for drastic measures. This comes on the back of former President Salami Abubakar just the other day. What's your sense?
Yes, indeed, you're correct. There's nothing new here. We do not need a survey or report from the Action Aid to understand the gravity of what we're facing today in Nigeria. And as we have heard different voices speaking up, like you mentioned, the former military president, Salami Abubakar, trying to reach the president to say conditions are there for many families. And this is part of the problems that we are seeing all over the country from this report. I think at the end of the day, people are expecting the president to do something. when you look at one of the front page stories today, we hear that the president has cancelled his trip to the United Nations General Assembly meeting. He has asked the vice president to instead lead the delegation. One of the reasons offered is that he needs to stay home in order to tackle the problems at home. Obviously, or probably, he needs to stay home in order to get a handle of the slew of challenges that we are facing at this time. And when you unpack that story further, what you see is that the biggest problem is the cost of transportation. The cost of fuel, which has affected the cost of transportation, it has affected housing, food, education,
spiral effect.
Purchasing power, everything is interlinked. So the problem is clear. That means the government knows where to go to or what to do. So the expectation is that you have to tackle the cost of energy, the cost of fuel, the cost of transportation. How they're going to do this, we're not certain, but the point is that we are looking forward to see a change in this. It's not going to be easy. It might take a bit of a time, but that's where the biggest problem lies.
I think another angle to the reports from Action Aid, I mean, in the reports we saw them talking about the girl child, is sort of what they say about the government's economic policies further deepening that gender inequality that we have in the country. And so how can we actually have gender-sensitive policies imbibe into these economic reforms to address this sort of disparities, especially to support vulnerable women, girl children during all this crisis?
Nkechi, you're correct. There have been gender disparities all along all these years in the country. There is a bit of awareness because civil society groups have been making, attempts on advocacy, whether it's at the local government level, the state level, and at the national level. But when we have this kind of problem, it presents new challenges, and so you have to take care, be aware, and make those special policies in order to cover this gap. I think one of the sense generally in the country is that the government lacks a team of outstanding, exceptional people with capabilities that we need at this time. I mean, you can't make the argument that even if you're brilliant, the Nigerian structure and the way the state is set up will dwarf you. At the same time, the government has been unable to generate that momentum significantly that shows that the actions it's taking, it knows what it's doing, and it's moving in the right direction. And so what we are going to see is that there will be more pressure over the coming months, to do the right thing, maybe to change the cabinet, maybe to take different policies. The government has made a lot of efforts. There are palliatives distributed here and there, although the sense is that palliative is not the way to go, but you do need it in the interim measure, as an interim measure. So a lot of work cut out for the government.
Now, Constance, this trend is really, really alarming, with people in rural areas said to be eating cassava leaves. It means they're not using ugu leaves or the other leaves to cook. The question of balanced diet is out of the window. I mean, nobody's talking about it. And then this also affects health, which it's said to be wealth, in the long term, debts, and then the working population that will contribute to the GDP of the nation, the earning capacity of the nation, is affected. Is government really thinking about this at all? I mean, it's alarming.
It is a complicated situation. It might seem infinitesimal at this moment, but it has an effect over time. Whatever is left undone today will have an impact tomorrow. And this is why you are seeing a lot of voices speaking up and saying to the government, we need to begin to make significant movement from today. We know it is not easy, but people want to see that the government is pulling itself together, and you want to see changes being done, and you want to hear that compelling argument that they actually know what they're doing. So it's a difficult time for Nigerians.
Okay.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Ikokwu.